Good afternoon. This is Mark Meyer. I'm going to attempt to go ahead and go through the weld symbol presentation that I have posted in hopes that it will help you learn a little bit more about how to interpret weld symbols. I have worked for over 20 summers at different trailer manufacturers here in the county, all three of them, and some of them use weld symbols more than others. But for sure, the one I've worked at the most, every single print or project that I've worked with uh, it includes weld symbols, and so you need to be able to understand how to use them in print reading, and probably if you want to go to any kind of contests or those kinds of activities, you need to know how to interpret a weld symbol and what that's all about. It's basically the language of the industry, and it can be difficult to learn. If you've learned a new language, or say you've tried to learn to read music, you have to understand what the symbols mean. You have to know what they're for. And so I think it's really important if you go on into a welding career that you have a background in weld symbols and what they are. They can be fairly simple, but they can be really confusing if you don't understand the language and the words that are used or the symbols that are used in it. So um, this follows along with the notes guide that I have that you should have out, and hopefully are recording some information on. So I'll probably go fairly fast on some things, but there'll be some other things that you may need to pause the video and do some work or write down some things to try and catch up. But I'm going to try to move fairly quickly. As you've probably already noticed, the red is what you need to jot down, but weld symbols at a very basic level can be used to indicate where welds should be placed on a project, on a skill, on a piece of equipment that we're building. I build truck beds and trailers a lot, but they can communicate a ton of things. And again, you can fill all those in. They can tell us what type of weld, how big that weld should be. They could indicate the kind of process that we're wanting to use, whether it's gas metal arc or shielded metal arc or gas tungsten arc, or you can use the slang terms that everybody's more familiar with. We can talk about how long that weld should be and the amount of penetration that is desired. Usually it's engineers that are designing those projects and are telling us this is where we want the weld. And even though welders kind of think we know where they should be, you know, I've got the final say so maybe, you can also get yourself in a lot of trouble if you don't put the weld where it's supposed to be. You can put a lot of material on and cost a lot of money for your employer if you're not making the welds that they expect. So let's talk about the basics. First of all, we got to back up and assume that we know all the kinds of weld joints. You know that we have a butt, a T-joint, lap, corner, and an edge type weld. We tend to use probably T's and laps a lot more than the others, although some places use a lot of butt welds. And again, if you don't know what they look like, you might want to pause and sketch them, but pretty simple. The corner is one that's kind of odd. You can either have a 90-degree one or basically a butt joint on the outside. And then an edge weld, we're putting on an edge of things. A lot of times we're going to bend things in a flange and put the weld there. You also, another basic that you should have known from your beginning welding classes are the 4 different welding positions, whether we're in a flat plane, which is the easiest, or the rest of them we're fighting gravity a little bit. So we have a vertical plane, could be vertical up or vertical down, horizontal plane, or again, the number 2. So I've got these numbers kind of around backwards, and then overhead is a 4 position, or the overhead. If we talk about the basic weld symbol itself, I would suggest that you draw that out on your notes. You've got space there. It's just a basic line. It's your reference line, and then you have the arrow line pointing to the side. And the arrow line could point down to the right, which is what I'm most used to, but it can certainly point a lot of different directions. It can point up and over, angle back, and so forth. It all depends on where it's going to fit on the print. And then some other things that basically aren't on your notes, but we'll talk a little bit about all these pieces. You know, the weld all around symbol, whether it's done in the field, the arrow that's pointing to the joint that it's all supposed to go to, and then there's a lot of stuff that can be put into the tail of the weld symbol. One of the more important things that you need to understand, and we'll put it on every contest that I design, is this concept of arrow side and other side. And that's going to tell you where the weld goes, okay? So the other side of the line, or the arrow side, the other side is always going to be on the top, and the arrow side is obviously going to be the one where the weld is pointing to. So again, this is worth putting down, and I don't think it's there in your notes, but I would definitely say you need to know the arrow side is always below the line, because sometimes that arrow can point up. It can point up and to the left, up and to the right, but the arrow side is always considered to be below the line, according to AWS standards and anybody that I've dealt with. So now, if we have something in a fillet weld where we've basically got a 90-degree corner going, the welds that are on the arrow side are obviously on the side that the arrow is pointing to, but then the other side would be away from that, on the other side of that fillet joint. Okay, so again, that's labeled there in your notes. So there you go. You've got this in your notes. Tell me what's the arrow side and what's the other side on the actual weld itself. Might want to even label them on the reference line itself as well. So which one would be the arrow side and which one would be the other side? Because this arrow is going up and to the right. So where would that be? Take a moment, pause this if you need, write it down, but indicate it in your notes. And let's check and see if you're right. Obviously the arrow side is still below the line. The other side is on top of the line. But in this case, I should back up. The arrow side then would be below this joint down here at the bottom side. This would be the arrow side because it's pointing to that side. The other side in this case is going to be the top of the weld. So again, label that. This is going to be the other side because it's going to be on top. That's where the arrow is pointing. All right, so now let's take a look at this one. Got a few other numbers there. Don't worry about them right now. Arrow side or other side, the symbol is on the top of the line. Is that arrow side or other side? So then when we put this weld in here, is it going to go to the left or to the right? So make your guess. And it actually is on the other side. So since it's on top of the line, it's on the other side, the symbol is. So this weld would go on the other side of that T-joint, okay? So another one for practice. Again, where should the weld go? Arrow's pointing down from the top. The symbol is a V-groove symbol, and it's below the line. So is that arrow side or other side? And where should the weld go? Well, that weld is on the arrow side because it's below the line, always arrow side. So in this case, we're pointing down to the top, so that weld should go on the top of that weld. Okay, because of where the symbol is located. That can be real confusing for people, so don't feel bad if you're scratching your head a little bit. We'll get you plenty of practice. Now, think about what we have. A groove weld is generally a pretty thick butt weld, and if we have metals over 1/4 inch thick, we're probably going to have some kind of edge preparation. We're going to have to cut a groove in it. We're going to have to V it out, bevel it, or gouge it, and I'll show you what those look like. But over 1/4 inch thick, which is probably about the most that most high school shops weld, you're going to have more than one pass. You can't just run a big fat pass there and expect it to be very strong. Just not going to happen. So if you turn your page over, here are the basic symbols. That corresponds to what you have there on your page. So above the line, the square butt symbol would be the 2 lines, and if it were below the line, then it would be these 2 things down below it, obviously. And that's the symbol, of course, with the arrow would be extended to the right or to the left. This one is a scarf weld above or below the line. I hardly ever see that. I'm told that it's used mainly for like bronze welds where we want to give a little bit more surface area for that bronze to stick to. You do see a lot of these, boy, a V-weld, that's really easy. This one is not a K-weld, this is a bevel. And a bevel is another one that's really, really common because it's really easy to cut an angle on one side, and that's all this is. On the V-groove, we've beveled or cut an angle, ground an angle, or torched it on both sides of the metal that we're butting up. A U-groove is a little bit more interesting. U-groove is one where we've gouged that out. I'm going to try to show you a picture of what that looks like on this piece of metal. We take a gouge rod and we basically gouge what looks to be a bit of a U in there. And it doesn't make it really pretty and clean, but you can kind of wire brush it, and that's going to get you. This is 3/8 metal, so we're not going to make this with just one pass, but that's what a U-groove would look like. And then I guess if we cut it in half, we would have what we call the J-groove, only one side. The other piece that's butting up to it's going to be flat. A flare V is more often if we've got a thinner piece that we've put a bend in, then the same with a flare bevel. We've got just the one side that's got a bit of a bend in it. I use those a lot on truck beds on the bottom side where we've bent kind of a cross member instead of channel iron. So the other one that's really, really common is a fillet weld, and that's not in your notes, so you're going to have to add this, put it to the right. You got plenty of space there to the top right-hand side of those notes, and maybe if you want to draw the arrow with it, you can. But a triangle is the basic symbol for a fillet weld. And again, any 90-degree joint is going to be a fillet weld. So that could be a T-weld, it could be the inside of a corner, it could be a lap weld. All those are fillet welds. And again, another thing, we'll talk about it later, but when you draw this triangle, the vertical leg is always to the left. Always has to be to the left. It is not correct for that to go the other direction. And there's a reason for it. Makes it look too much like a bevel or something else, I guess. But the vertical line is always to the left. That's just something that wouldn't be bad to put down. So we take a look at this symbol. It's below the line. So what symbol would that be? If you look back at your notes, you probably would guess pretty easily that it's a bevel. It is on the arrow side. So in this case, this would be below whatever weld. And another thing is this one's backwards. It should really point to the piece that's being beveled. So that's actually backwards, but that's not a real big critical thing. And we're either going to use a torch or a grinder or a Plaz-Arc. I've got a track torch that would put that bevel on that piece of one of the edges of the piece metal, and then we would butt it up together and go ahead and fill it back in. Track torches are really, really nice. If you grind it, it's going to take you forever. There's the note that I want you to make sure it's on the important note even. Vertical leg of the symbol is always drawn to left. So whether that is the bevel or if it's the fillet weld, the vertical leg is always to the left. Very, very important to know if you want to draw them correctly. And you will be asked to be drawing some, so get that down. So let's practice. What are the steps for drawing a weld symbol? And it goes on A below 3A. For a V, we're going to do a V groove. So draw your flat reference line. So it's going to look something like that. Draw your arrow. Let's go down and to the left, since that's the way I'm drawing it. Okay. And then where would you put the V if we're going to put it on the bottom? So let's go ahead and quickly put a V symbol on there and then take a look. It'll be basically 2 lines, and they can both be angled. Try to put them kind of in the middle. Okay. Simple enough. So let's draw then the weld symbol for a flat butt weld with a V groove edge preparation on the bottom of the reference line, and then sketch the completed weld. So what is that going to look like? Be something like that. Because we're on the arrow side below the line, that V groove would be on the top piece because this arrow is pointing down. Okay, so again, not a bad idea to go ahead and sketch that in there if you've got time. So pause this if you need to, sketch it. You will want to refer back to it. And that's what it would look like if we were to go below the line, if like we did below before, if we have it below and the arrow is pointing up, that's still arrow side, that's backwards. So never mind, ignore that one, that's a bad one. Sorry. All right, so here's a little bit different one. If we are to take a look at drawing the weld symbol and finish weld for a flat T-weld and the vertical piece is beveled. So what is that gonna look like? I'll give you a chance to try and do it on your own if you want. Real simple, sketch a flat piece and then sketch your T-weld. And then what would that happen if that top piece is beveled? We're just going to grind an angle in it, okay? And so it's going to end up looking something like that, okay? And if we were to go ahead and draw our piece, because this is on the top of the line, it is the arrows, the other side, and so this would actually be happening on the right-hand side. Since we're on the top of the line, that is on the other side, okay? And if we were to do, this is a really poor sketch, but if we were to draw that on the bottom side, this is what it would look like, okay? All right. I am going to stop right there and have you watch the second part of this another time because I'm out of time.